An eerie sight, for my monster from his slab began to rise, and suddenly, to my surprise,
he did the mash.
He did the monster mash.
The monster mash.
It was a graveyard smash.
He did the mash.
It caught on in a flash.
He did the mash.
He did the monster mash. From my laboratory in the castle east to the master bedroom where the vampires feast. The ghouls all came from their humble abode to get a jolt from my electrode.
They did the mash.
They did the monster mash.
The monster mash.
It was a graveyard
They
smash.
did the mash.
It caught on in a flash.
They did the mash.
They did the monster mash. The zombies were having fun. The party had just begun. The guests included Wolfman, Dracula, and his son. The scene was rocking over.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Haunted October, What the Frick Live. Thank you so much for tuning in for the show. Hello, Will.
Hey, good evening. How are you?
I'm doing a lot better. I wish I was
That voice. I'm doing a lot better.
I wish I was on camera tonight, but everybody, I had surgery on Wednesday. It's a planned surgery, so it's all good. And I was feeling fantastic yesterday, but it's kind of settled in now, and I don't look well enough to be on camera this evening, so I'm not canceling. Okay. I'm not canceling Haunted October. I'm not. It's my favorite month.
There we go. That we can. That's dedication. That's why I love it.
It is. Yes. I worked so hard on Haunted October. We
yes,
have
you do.
Amazing guests this year. But Will, tell us about you. How's everything going down there in Florida?
Oh, everything's fine. Down in South Florida, everything's fine. Up in North Florida, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's not real well with the Hurricane Helene that passed through, and it's devastated that really northern corner of Florida, and also affected South and North Carolina as well. So, yeah, just praying for those families, and hopefully, they get all the relief that they can get, you know what I mean? Because it's a bad situation. I know how it is, being here, living in Florida all my life. I'm 44 years old. I've seen a lot of devastation, so I know how it is, and it sucks. But I'm very hopeful that, everybody can kind of get together and, help those people as well. So, but yeah, everything's fine at Dark Fringe Radio, darkfringeradio.com. You can check us out. Tomorrow we're going to be coming out with a new episode. It's kind of off topic, but it's more of the true crime, discussing Diddy.
Yay!
Yeah, I'm going to be doing a real deep dive into that whole situation. It's me, my co-host Jay, and also my cousin who are on that podcast. Yeah, so it's going to be really cool. Really happy about it, how it came out. So tomorrow, check it out, darkfringeradio.com. So that's it.
Just real fast, I'm definitely going to be listening to that. But when I was coming out of anesthesia, which I messaged you and told you this, I was talking to the nurses about P. Diddy and Kanye, and they told me that I said, don't be surprised if the real Kanye shows back up. And then I was rapping
Oh,
Gold Digger.
oh
You ain't
my
messing with
gosh.
no broke.
I swear, if there was video of that,
I wish there was. I
I
wish there
wish there
was.
was.
But good evening, Eddie and Doug, for
Hey,
tuning in.
Eddie.
We are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. So please share this out. It helps our show. It helps our guests. Make comments, ask questions over on Rumble. Give us a positive thumbs up. We appreciate y'all over there. Ask questions over there too. I'll bring them up during the show. But we have an amazing guest on this evening, and this is Haunted October. This year we're doing a little bit different. We're doing a lot more like ghost storytelling in many
Yeah.
aspects. But we're going to introduce her, and then we're going to play a video, one of her stories, which creeped me out to no end, and it comes with a picture, y'all. So there's a lot going on with this story, but we're going to introduce her, play a story, and then Jill's going to be on with us after this video. But get ready for a thrilling episode as we welcome Jill, a wedding industry pro with a career that started at just 17 years old. She's a licensed floral designer, expert wedding planner, a venue owner for over a decade. But beyond crafting beautiful weddings, Jill dives into the eerie with her popular TikTok account called The Nickle Tree, where she shares spine-chilling stories of haunted New Orleans. With her tagline, which I love her tagline, "You didn't ask for it, but I'm going to tell it anyway." She's captivated countless followers. Tonight, she's here to share some of her most terrifying encounters, from haunted nun story to eerie wedding venues, restaurants, hotels, you name it. You don't want to miss out. So let's listen to one of her stories, and then we'll have Jill on to talk about the Nickle Tree. Here we go.
Story that no one asked me to tell, but I'm going to tell it anyway. And this one has a picture with it. So wait till the end so you can see I have proof on this that I'm telling you, and really on almost everything that I say. So my husband and I bought this old house in 2006, and over 200 years old. And I was really worried about the house. And so I one day just called this psychic. She was actually on Sirius Radio. So I ended up talking to her, and then I ended up like setting up this call with her later on. And then eventually we became friends. So one of the things she said about the house was, she says, you know, there's a little girl that lives there. This was early on. This was like 2006, 2007. She told me, she says, a little girl that lives there. And I said, oh, no, there's no little girl that lives here except my little girl. And she says she's up at the top of the stairs. She has a white dress on. She has black hair, and her hair pulled back with a little blue bow. And I was like, okay. Well, every once in a while I would be sitting there like late at night, and I would hear like children's laughter. And I would look up, look around, because I thought maybe my husband was there with the kids or whatever. We didn't live there. So always, nobody was there. So I kind of just blew it off, and every once in a while she'd say, hey, did you ever see that little girl? I'm like, yeah, you know, I don't really see things. I hear things, I smell things, that kind of thing. Very rarely do I actually see something unless it's in the corner of my eye. No, I haven't seen you, little girl. Not even thinking about it. So we decide my son's wedding is going to be there. And so my friend came, and she's this fantastic floral artist from New Orleans. And so she decorates it. It's fabulous, flowers everywhere. Great photographers. They come in, they do pictures. So the pictures come back from the photographer, and we're looking at them. They're beautiful. They're beautiful. Probably like, I don't know, the fifth, sixth time we're going through them. My oldest daughter came to me, and she said, I want you to look at something. And in the front of the house that has the only original window of over 200 years, so it was one of those wavy windows, there she was. The little girl with the black hair, pulled back with a ribbon, and her little white dress. She came to the wedding, and she's in our pictures. So, look at the picture yourself. See if it gives you goosebumps.
That gave me goosebumps.
Yeah.
I might have to pull that picture up again.
It's my story.
Yeah. Wow.
That is crazy. It looks just like a little girl with the black bow and everything on there. It's wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
well,
people love that story. It was really the first time I had ever showed it like to more than just like friends and family. Like, what do you think of this picture? And we had a lot of response from it. And I did conceal the name of my venue because different people own it. So I like it now. So I don't want, I want their business to be good. So, but yeah, it was my son's wedding. And when I saw that photo, it was definitely a confirmation of everything that had happened for 13 years at that place. It was like, okay, I wasn't imagining any of this. This is all here. Everything happened. And then kind of started sharing, different things about it. Plus lots of other stories too.
Doug, he watches our show quite a bit. He wants to know, have you spotted the little girl since then? Have you heard any other stories about the little girl possibly?
So I sold it in 2018, and we did share with the people here in New Orleans. My son's a real estate agent, and believe it or not, you do not have to tell people if you think the place is haunted or whatever, but we did. And they were like thrilled. They were great, bring it on. But I don't I sold the property and moved on. I mean, I don't really have communication with them. So,
well, my first question. Well, Jill, my first question for you this evening is kind of like a two-part question. What first sparked your interest in sharing haunted encounters? And then how did you come up with the Nickle tree? Because I love the name of the Nickle tree, and I'm sure that there's some kind of meaning behind it. But can you tell us what interests you in haunted encounters and then the Nickle tree?
Okay, so the Nickle tree, I'll start with first, came from my grandmother's house on Willow Street in New Orleans. And, you always have that person in your life who they're just the warm hug of your childhood. And that was my grandmother and her house. And it's not like it was this beautiful home or anything. It was a shotgun house and had a store in the front of it. And after Hurricane Camille, our house had been destroyed. So we had 6 of us and we were farmed out to different people. And my sister and I got my grandmother's house. And so we were bored. I was 4 or 5 and she was 1 year older. And so they had this little game, her and my aunt, and they said, "Hey, have you seen our money tree?" Like, well, no, we haven't seen a money tree. So they took us out back and they said, "You see our money tree?" I'm like, "I don't see any trees with money." And next to the steps, they had this little table and it actually had this succulent plant on it. And she says, "Oh, they don't have any money right now, but come back later." So it was like Christmas every day. We'd go out to see it and they'd put nickels on the tree. And so we're like, "Well, that's not a money tree. That's a nickel tree." And she says, "Well, it's still money." But she was teaching us like, okay, now you save these little nickels and you get a quarter and then you save the quarters and you get $1. So that's where the name came from. And originally, because I'm also just a serial entrepreneur and I really wanted to talk about just like small business and, just different little tips and stuff like that. And so me and my daughter and I were kind of like playing around. She goes, "Let's just like get a couple of your stories." And this salesman had just left where I work. I'm a GM of 2 different venues. And he had just left and I was telling him the story of the Monteleone Hotel. And all the blood from his face just drained out. Like he looked at me like I was a crazy person about to attack him. We have been sitting there for like an hour and a half talking, and suddenly he's fearful of me or something and starts packing up his stuff and gets up and just walks out. Never heard from him again. So she says, "Why don't you tell the Monteleone story?" So I said, "Okay, that's fine." So I tell that Monteleone story, which now I think has 2.4 million views on it. And I'm like, she's okay. I'm gonna post this to TikTok, which I knew nothing about TikTok. And on the way home, like an hour later, she called and she goes, "There's 4,000 views on this." And I said, "Is that good?" So that's how it all started. And people were like, "I love this story. Do you have another story?" So that's really how everything started. It was supposed to be like a little business advice kind of thing. And now it's just another facet of my life of having all of these encounters.
Well, I have the picture of the Monte Leon hotel up. Do
There
you
it
want
is.
to share
It's
a little
beautiful.
bit? Share a little bit
Yeah,
of how that got started?
Yeah, this was around, first of all, I've had just different things happen to me since I was a little girl. But this happened so randomly that I didn't even have time barely to feel afraid. I was making a flower delivery with my son, Joey, who, you know, just like straight laced, doesn't believe in anything. And I was doing over 300 weddings a year. So we would split up into like groups of delivery. So we're delivering some bouquets to the Monte Leon Hotel. And we walk up. At that time, we had to go to the concierge. Okay, where's this girl? What room? All this kind of stuff. And he says, oh, it's on the 14th floor. I'm like, okay, that's fine. So we're carrying these 2 boxes. We get on the elevators on the left side of the hotel, which are the older elevators. And I don't know if they're original to the hotel, but they're pretty old. And we press 14 and we go up. And the doors open. Now, remember, I am in full focus here. I'm not like looking, whatever, but I'm aggravated because we're going down this hallway and it says 1325, 1327. And we see this lady, we see 2 things. This lady folding towels, and it looked like, you know, she had her little cart. So I guess she was cleaning a room. And this staircase, like a half staircase at the end of that hallway. So I guess in my mind, I was thinking, okay, they must connect these 2 floors. Like you must go up those little half steps, and then that's going to lead to the 14th floor. So we go down, it's still continuing with the 1300. I'm like, oh my gosh, where are we? Like I was worried we were going to be late with this delivery and stuff. So we still, both of us are oblivious to the whole 13th floor. There's probably 5,000 people who have said on that video, everybody knows there's not a 13th floor. I honestly didn't know. I didn't know. I was like, okay. So we go back, we ask the lady, she sees through us. She's not talking to us at all. So like, okay, this was creepy. And that's when him and I looked at each other, and that's when it dawned on us something like really strange was going on. So we went back to the elevator, got on the elevator. We're looking at each other like not saying a word. I press 14. The doors close. I press 14. The doors open again. And he's like, all right, Mom. I think he was about 15. He's like, all right, let's just go see. We get off, and there it is, 1425, 1427, where we had just been or thought we were. Mm-hmm. So we deliver everything really like, again, just too like shaken to talk. We weren't to the scared part yet. We were just like shaken to talk. So we drop everything off. We don't say anything. We get back on that same elevator. We're going down the elevator. And now there's this man standing in the corner, way back in the corner. So it looked to me that he was either like a manager or maybe like somebody who an elevator operator that they used to have, something like that. But he looked like he was in authority. But remember, if he had some kind of like costume-ish kind of old looking thing, that doesn't bother us in New Orleans because people are like wearing crazy stuff all the time, like going to different events. So that didn't faze me. And I said, yeah, this really strange thing. Do you work here? This really strange thing just happened to us. And I explained it to him, and he looked straight ahead and he says, there's no 13th floor. Wow. So now both of us are like, get me out of here. This is so creepy. We get all the way to the bottom floor. We're getting off. We look back. Nobody's there. So
wow.
I recall, I think we had 7 or 8 weddings that day. So we really didn't talk about it. And we didn't talk about it for a couple of things. He's like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about this. And no kidding, it was like just a few Thanksgivings ago. We're all sitting around the table, and because I have 7 children, and my husband, and we're all sitting around, we're laughing and cutting up about all the crazy stories and all the stuff I've gotten them into. Not that they've gotten me and stuff. They act like they're so perfect, but all. Y'all there?
I'm here.
Yeah, we lost you for a second there, Jill.
Oh,
Yeah.
I heard her story. Then I heard, "Are you there?" So she didn't cut out on my end.
Yeah. So anyway, a couple of Thanksgivings ago, I brought up the Monteleone story, and my son was still like, "I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about the Monteleone."
He still was
the other-
traumatized by it. Huh?
What happened? He was still stressed out by it, and so
Yeah.
Wow. He knows it's true, but he's still, and then all kind of stuff. He worked with me at the venue, so he, over the years, I mean, at that time, he was just a teenage kid, and so he was like, "I don't believe in all this stuff, blah 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 blah, Mom, you're crazy."
Mm-hmm.
And then all that happened, and so he knows that there's just this, I guess, mystical kind of thing that happened. Different people have said it's, "Oh, you were on a different level," or or it was that.
I was actually going to ask you that, Jill. Yeah. Do you feel like you were on a different plane, maybe, or you went into a different dimension?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I do. I honestly just thought I was seeing like a ghost or something at the time. But the more I thought about it and just was able to talk about it and had different, that people that I told, because I didn't tell that many people. One of my things I always say, I answer almost every comment that people make on the Nickle Tree. Almost every one I make a comment. And I know. And
it's hard work.
Yeah. And I always tell people, they'll say, "Well, this happened. And the first thing I'm like, I believe you. I believe that happened. Because I'm so used to, over the years, people, that didn't happen. That's crazy. Or this is my favorite. I don't believe in that kind of thing. Or this is even better. I'm very religious, so that doesn't happen to me. And it's like, it happens to everybody, But some people can see things happening and some people can't. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
To me, when people are just like, "Oh, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God," and I'm like, "Yeah, you let one of those little spirits visit you. Watch how fast you say, 'God help me.'"
Yeah. I was actually having a conversation with somebody earlier tonight, and we were talking about intuition. When you just get a feeling about being in a bad place or something bad's going to happen to you when you turn around a corner. I mean, what is that? That's obviously you tapping into something, right? You're tapping into something when you're doing that.
It taps into me.
Yeah.
Things come to me. Like I don't ask for it, and I never have. And, I think my grandmother, the one with the Nickle Tree, I believe she had it. I believe my father had it. All of my daughters, my sons too, but one of them in particular. But it's just something in that, like, you can hear something and somebody else can't, or you just have more interactions. And I think that there must be a way when people cross over that they know the people that they can contact, if that makes sense. Like they know. But at the same time, like I say all the time on the Nickle Tree, I'm like, I don't do readings. I think that my gift is telling stories. And I think that's the way I reach people and where they're at, is through the stories.
And speaking of the stories, I want to know how you came up with the inspiration behind the tagline. You didn't ask for it, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Like, is this something in the family? Like, your sons are like, "No, don't say it, Mom," and then you're like, "I'm going to tell it anyway." Like, how did you come up with the tagline? I love it.
Theirs would be a comical way, If I said it about my children, it'd be like, "Look, I know I'm going to embarrass you, but I'm saying this anyway." No. The no one asked me to tell, but I'm going to tell it anyway, is I was the youngest girl of 5. We had 6 children, and I call it hiding behind curtains. I mean, just nobody wanted to hear from me. And so I'm 60 years old, and now I'm just like, the hell with it. I'm just going to say it, like it was always, not necessarily about, this like scary stories or anything like that. It was about anything. And so
Mhm.
I, it was always like, shut up, just don't say anything, nobody cares, blah, 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 blah. And so that's really where it came from. There's a little bit of anger in it. Like, even though I say it's smiling, it's almost like every time I say it, I'm pointing to one of my siblings.
Mhm, mhm,
Like, here I
mhm.
am, I'm talking, you can't stop me.
Yeah, I get it. Jill,
Yeah.
when you these things happen, and these circumstances happen to you, do you ever look back at the historical of the building and try to find
Yeah.
out maybe what happened? Yeah, yeah. Do you do a lot of
Oh
that?
yeah. That's really part of it. It's really part of
Yeah.
it. And what I do is, because I've been in some of these, so many of these old buildings,
Mm.
if I have experienced something in that building, I will say that first, and then I'll give a little history, and then I'll say that maybe this happened to somebody else. But if it's not my story, I'm really clear about that, and I will say, I was told this, I read this, here's the history of this, da da da, and I just kind of put that in. And a good example of that is I'm constantly asked about, do you have any vampire stories? Do you have any vampire stories? I'm like,
Yeah.
other than where I
Mm.
stand for Mardi Gras in front of Anne Rice's house, I do not have any vampire stories, and I'm not going to make it up.
Mhm.
And I could, but I'm just not, and the one that I read, I was like, you got to read this, you got to read. And I read it, and I'm like, it just didn't. It's not that I don't believe people, but it's just not an experience I've had. So even if it got a lot of views, it doesn't matter. I don't want to lie to people.
Right.
There's a Netflix documentary coming out here in the next couple months about the largest vampire group of people out of
Yeah.
Ohio. I don't know if you've all seen that, but I think of
No.
vampires and a lot of witches and things down in I say New Orleans, Nolans. How do you all say it?
It's New Orleans. It's New
New
Orleans.
Orleans?
I think
Okay.
Hollywood really came up with New Orleans after Katrina. I don't know how they did that. There are some dialects. There's several dialects that we can tell in our cities, with like different regions people come from, just in the city. That's how like close it is. So some people may call it that. But it's kind of like saying the religion of New Orleans is voodoo, which I was explaining
Right.
to
Yeah.
somebody yesterday who came to visit the venue. I'm like, you're mistaken about this. I said, can you help us? Like, they were bringing a convention or something to our venue, and they're like, can you help us explain the religion of New Orleans? I'm like, this isn't our religion. It used to be, when I was growing up, 75% of people here were Catholic. And when people came in from other countries, they practiced voodoo, and then they mixed it with Catholicism as they intermarried into, Catholic families. And so that's why if you go like into the voodoo shops and stuff, they'll have like the Blessed Mother and saints and that kind of thing, because they're kind of like blending the two religions.
Santeria as
But
well. Yeah.
it's definitely not like this big thing here. It's not. I respect it. And people, if that's what they want to do, what they want to practice, but it's like a very small part of the population, and it's not who we are. And I think a lot of people go with that misconception. And yes, I do think that New Orleans is haunted in a lot of ways, but I don't think it's evil. There are places like the Lalaurie house that are, but most places are just like friendly ghosts that haven't left.
Hmm. Hmm. Let me ask you a quick question, Jill, if you don't mind me asking. Have you ever been into, maybe, because you're in the city of New Orleans, right? And just like any other city, things get repurposed, right? Old buildings get turned into a CVS or a Walgreens or something like that, or a bank, or whatever the case may be. Have you just gone into a building all of a sudden, and then something like kind of came together, and in like an unsuspecting place that you probably wouldn't have, thought that something would be there?
Right. When something is built, and remember, like in the French Quarter, they don't
Mhm.
tear those buildings down.
No.
So
Right.
even when buildings have burnt down, like the cathedral's burnt down, I think 4 times. And even when something's burnt down, they're like using any wall they can. They always
Mhm.
same foundation, everything. So it's all the same land of original. Now the French Quarter itself is like this grid. So when it was first built, we're like a bowl that we're right on the Mississippi, so it goes in, and yeah, all these old buildings. It's like going to Europe, like just old town. We don't tear that down. And so there was only so much land that they could use. So they had no place to bury people. So they started burying people like on the outskirts. Well, guess what happened? Just like you saw that flood with the coffin floating down. I don't know if y'all saw that picture.
Yeah.
That's what was happening in New Orleans. And so a lot of, before they started building ground, they started burying people on the same land that they were living. And then 20, 30 years would go by and people didn't know they were buried there, and they'd build a house or they'd build a building or something like that. I mean, the Superdome was built on a huge cemetery.
Yes.
And for years people said, oh, that's why we're never going to win the Super Bowl, because they built it on sacred land. It's all sacred land. So you have that whole aspect of, all of those old buildings with old spirits and that kind of thing, but you also have the ground. And then you have that we bury people above ground. So there's a whole lot of things that are coming into this. But like I said, not all of it necessarily is scary evils. I mean, most of it, I think, is like almost playful kind of thing, but scary.
Well, and how New Orleans it's like a bowl too, right? Like it's surrounded by water. It's surrounded by water and things, and that's known to be a conduit for spiritual experiences too with the water.
Yeah, and it was funny when I was watching all that water coming in to North Carolina and all that last week, and that just raging water coming in, and that's exactly what I thought. I thought, wow, I wonder if there's going to be some energy after and there's so much unsettlement, because when you renovate or move things or whatever, you're also going to have that upset of spirit. So I think we'll see some stories coming out of there in a couple of years.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And me being up here in the Appalachia, North Carolina is just like 3 hours from me. There's now stories coming out that the water has receded and there's just been people discovering bodies on front lawns and everything. It's very tragic. I'm going to tear up talking about it. It's mind blowing. Who would think of eye of a hurricane would ever come to Appalachia area from the Gulf side?
Right. And none of us knew. I mean, we were all worried about Florida, and none of us even thought about, nor did the people who got hit with that. I mean, people are like, why didn't they just evacuate? I'm like, did they have time? I mean,
no, they didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't. There's video on TikTok that people, even the fire department, was coming around the night before saying that they weren't expecting a major flood, that they're safe and all this stuff. All of a sudden you see this person's like, man, the water's coming down really bad. And then like, what is that? And you can see the water moving. It's the eeriest video I've ever seen in the woods, all these big, huge pine trees and everything else. And it's like waves crashing down, and it comes closer, and it's huge waves coming in, and it's mud. It's all mud, and it wipes these houses. I've never seen anything before like that in my life. These people weren't prepared. This just never happened, and it's a catastrophe. Right. And there's going to be stories coming out of that. Speaking of that, though, you were there with Hurricane Katrina, right?
Oh yeah,
Jill.
Yeah, honestly, I couldn't talk about it for probably 17 years. I mean, I really could. I was very affected by Hurricane Katrina, for sure.
Has any like haunted stories come out of that? Like, have people experienced things from victims or have captured anything on camera or anything like that you're aware of that have maybe stemmed from Katrina?
So after Katrina, the city was really shut down, and the surrounding areas. And I know that there were first responders who have told stories about just seeing like spirits walking down the street, or seeing somebody like tuck into a building and then going down there and nobody's in the building. So I do think that there was a big upset during that time. And some people have told stories about it when people went to go and, see survivors, just like, my God, it just reminds me so much of what's going on right now. To try to find survivors and what they found in the house and the eeriness and, it wasn't, I don't think it was as fast as what you're saying, what happened to those people with the water just coming down that fast. The levees broke. The hurricane was like, but we were okay. It was that the levees broke and flooded. Now, not that it didn't flood the French Quarter, but it had flooded like a lot of New Orleans. And people didn't know because they didn't have electricity. There was nobody there to warn them that all this water was coming in. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there are lots of stories that there's lots of stories of gentle spirits, I believe, that were just kind of awakened. But, I think people would rather hear about like the scary stuff. And on the Nickle Tree, I try to cover all the ghosts. Tell the ones the ones nobody talks about, I'll bring those on, because I'm like, they all know. Yeah, this is all energy, and
I want to hear some of the positive stories. I want to hear some of the cool ghosts, the ones that that have cool stories, that's trying to scare people. Can you give us maybe one of those stories of one of the more positive side or of this whole thing?
Well, if you watch these videos on here, I kind of put a positive spin to almost everything. The way that I tell them is you would think I'm telling every single one of them are positive. But there were quite a few that came out of the place that I owned. And I haven't told all of them on the Nickle Tree yet, but I will in a few weeks. But there was more than just that little girl there. And, I tell people all the time, I've done all kind of crazy businesses in my life, but that one was like a gigantic investment. And I mean, when I got it and then we had to become caterers and stuff like that, my friends were like, but Jill, you don't know how to cook. And I'm like, well, you know what? When you owe $1 million, you learn how to cook. So it was kind of the same thing. When you owe $1 million, you learn to put up with those ghosts. And so I would stay late on Tuesdays. And then when they had time change and stuff, it got really dark. And I'm sitting there one night and the front door sounded like it kept opening and then slamming closed, opening and then slamming closed. And then I get up, I go see, because I thought my client was there. They weren't there. And then the back of the house started rattling and moving, like it sounded like the gutters were coming off, and I go look out there, it's all fine, all this other kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I finally was so aggravated. And I know you're not supposed to like talk to anything, but I felt like they were playing. And I said, you know what? Keep it up, because I'm going to put that for sale sign out there and I'm going to be gone. And all of a sudden it stopped. It was like mom got mad at the children. It was like, mom's mad. Mom's mad.
William Martinez Jr. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The whole
and that was before the discovery of the little girl. I mean, it was just, it was crazy. And then, of course, there are just messages that I've received. I always tell people, look for signs, look for clear signs. They will send them to you if you ask. And there have just been those kind of happy things too. I wasn't really close to my father, but I've had several decisions. And one time I was making a decision whether I should enclose this big part in the back of my venue and stuff. And it would prevent the weddings from being, rained on, whatever. And I was like, what do I do? Dad, help me. I'm sitting out on the bench with my little girl. She was about 4 years old. And I'm out at my house, not at my venue. And all of a sudden this rain cloud came right over us. And she looks at me, she says, Mommy, it's just raining on us. And my son was playing football out in the grass. And I mean, it really was. It was only raining on us. It was like, okay, there's a sign. So
might be a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I built the building.
Yeah. You built the
And
building.
made me a lot
Yeah.
of money. So that was
Wow.
Well,
Wow.
with you, Jill, you have a business and everything, wedding, and you do floral arrangements, and you've been to many venues in New Orleans and things. I do have and now we're going to still be on the screen. Everybody's going to hear us comment if we talk or anything like that. But I do have a story that you posted that I absolutely loved, and it was great. You're kind of part of it, kind of not, but is it Muriel's restaurant? Is that how you say that?
Muriel's.
Muriel's.
Yeah.
Muriel's restaurant. I want to play this story about what happened at this venue because there was tons of witnesses. It's not just like one or two
Oh,
things.
yeah.
Like
This
everybody
was
saw
not my
this.
instruction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the more the people that witness something, the better it is, in my opinion. So
Oh,
this
yeah.
is a very interesting story. I want to play it now. We're going to listen to it. Here we go.
As an event designer here in New Orleans, I went to a lot of places, a lot of these downtown places known for really strange things happening. And one of those places that was very popular, still is a restaurant called Muriel's. And in Muriel's, you go down this long corridor, which was used as an entryway, and back in the day had like horse and buggies and that kind of thing. But I'm pretty clairvoyant, and every time I go down that corridor, I can just feel it. Some people can't, and they're like, you're crazy, you don't know what you're talking about. But if you're like me, you know that kind of feeling, that eerie feeling. So at the end of this corridor, it's at the bottom of the steps. So Muriel's has this table set up, and you are supposed to, if you have events, which are always upstairs, set it and put like a roll or a piece of bread, 2 glasses of red wine. And so they tell people this. They're like, you should really do this. So I was working an event, and I had my whole team come in, and we're carrying everything up these stairs. It's like 3 flights of stairs. And you go up to these 2 rooms, and then they have this back room that's called the seance room. Now, I don't go in the seance room because I don't want to feel what I know I can feel. So I just like beware, I'm not going in there. So we set everything up, it's fine, and then we leave. Well, that night, my husband and Mr. Houston, who has worked with us for 30 years, went to go and pick up everything. So they see the table, table still doesn't have anything on it. They go up the stairs to take everything down. And what they walk into are all these people, some of them laughing, some of them in shock, some of them look like they're white as a ghost, all of this stuff, all discussing the same thing. So what happened was when someone got up to do a speech, the wait staff had these champagne glasses all lined up on the side on a table and on this mantle above it. And so when the person stood up to give a speech, there goes the wine glasses one at a time. Pop, 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 pop. On their own, everybody's looking to see who's breaking those wine glasses. It wasn't an act. It wasn't planned. It wasn't some kind of like little, woo, New Orleans kind of thing that we planned. It was them. And so if you ever go to Muriel's, and especially if you have an event there, you better believe that table better be set. They need to be invited to your event.
There we go. Muriel's. And I want to pull up a picture of Muriel's here in a little bit, but do you experience that a lot in different venues down there in New Orleans with wedding, or is this just like, that's amazing to me that so many people witness that,
Yeah, I think that more than anything, I'm among a lot of wedding professionals, and when I started telling the stories of the different places, they were calling me and emailing or talking on the phone, whatever, and saying, Jill, that happened to me. Like, I remember that. Or have you looked at this place? Because this happened. I think it's the energy that a wedding brings. And like I told y'all, it's not necessarily like these evil, terrible people. It's more like, notice me. I'm still here. How come I didn't come, There's stories about the Bourbon Orleans Hotel, which is the same thing, which, they have these, 2 ghosts there that met for the last time before he went off to the Civil War. And she's looking in the window and he's in the foyer, and they're always looking for each other. He passed away in the Civil War, so she waited by the window to see if he'd ever come back. So they have some like just romantic, heartbreaking stories. They have a lot of stories about these in these hotels because they were used as originally hospitals, and nuns worked in these hospitals, and so a lot of nun stories in there, a lot of Civil War soldiers all wrapped up and that kind of thing, which are like, why? Well, when you start looking at the history, you see War of 1812 and Civil War, and then and what buildings were used for that, and their energies are still there. Not to hurt at all, I think. I said this when I talked about Lalaurie House. I said, gosh, what if they're there, not because of eternal damnation? What if they're there so we'll never forget what happened in that house? So it's almost like a little play over and over.
It's scary for the Lalaurie
It's a different
House.
way to think about it. Yeah.
It's scary, but are we forgetting history? Do we need to be reminded of it by the ghost?
Yes,
So,
we do.
New
Yes.
Orleans is a very historic place, and we try to just honor, like, we've done a lot of things wrong and we've done a lot of things right. I myself just try to honor all of it, not just pieces of it.
Mm-hmm. Jill, let me ask you this. I've been down to Bourbon Street myself, and that particular street, I'm not sure about how you feel about it, but I'm not saying I'm a sensitive or whatever the case may be, but I've walked down that street and I felt like my feet were energized by electricity.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how else to explain it. I really don't. I mean,
I think it's
I've never
not
felt
just
that.
right. I think it's not just the energy of, it is the energy of people who are there visiting, and most of the time, that is just laughter and electric and that kind of thing. But it's also what's beneath it.
Right.
It's it's under those streets. And just recently, I believe in 2023, somebody was digging up for a swimming pool in one of those, see these houses that you have up. So some of those are that's Bourbon Street, but some of those are businesses, and then they have like little people's houses in between there, and then they're beautiful. Like, you go in and they have these gorgeous courtyards and everything else. So somebody decided to build a swimming pool in the French Quarter. It wasn't on Bourbon Street, but it was still in the French Quarter. And so they started digging, and you see layers and layers and layers of streets, and then brick streets, and then gravel streets, and then so they finally get far enough down to build a swimming pool, and there were all these bodies down there, all these bones, and so they're pretty sure that it was when the city was hit with scarlet fever, and they were just doing mass graves, and it didn't matter if you were white or black or Irish or Spanish. Everybody was just being buried quickly in these mass graves, because they felt like scarlet fever was coming from the emissions of the dead bodies. So they wanted to get them buried as quickly as possible. So that is where that energy is coming from as well. It's like you were literally walking on sometimes on graves.
And grace. Yeah.
Reminds me of the Poltergeist movies.
Yeah.
The house is built on top, and they have the pool or whatever underneath. Like,
it's weird. No, the way I explain it, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but Emily, if you
good.
ever go down there, and I went there like during a time where there was nothing like going on. It wasn't during any kind of like festival. I was there on business. I was there on like personal business, and I decided to go down there, and I was like, wow, this is like a different thing. This is not normal. This is not. You feel it once you walk down that corridor. It's like
I love that feeling, though. I love that feeling of history.
I do too, but it's scary though.
I will say this: you almost have to go when you are, like, I know you were at work, but not like if you work down there, then you almost have to go when it's not work, because it is, if you can feel that essence, some of that is a little draining as well. And like I said, my daughter and I went down there last week, and we just had a break at work, and she says, hey, let's go down there and we'll just take a couple of pictures so you can put them on your TikTok. And she's also very clairvoyant, and we went down there, and I was like, okay, we have to go. I erased all the pictures that I took. We went on Royal Street. And I said, and she says, I agree. We got to get out of here. I mean, we just both felt like, and it was not, I think it was a Tuesday. So there wasn't a lot of people out or anything like that. So I agree with you. It's just the place itself. But my whole thing with the Nickle tree is to explain to people that although it has a lot of energy, a lot of it is like a peaceful energy. It's not all bad. And that was kind of a bad deal we got with Katrina as well, when gosh, it must have been years. The news was, just like, it's dirty there. You're going to get sick going there. And I had somebody just the other day, it's 19 years gone since Katrina, 19 years ago. And this lady says, I was told to never come there. That's a bad, dirty place. You get sick there. I'm like, what? Years. So I don't know how long we have to carry that cross. I hope that doesn't happen to these other states that this just happened to. But, it's mainly a good place with good people,
It is.
and
I think
they
it
really
is
work.
misconception.
I think there's a lot of deception in it too, but also there's a lot of that voodoo history that plays in. And I hate to turn this, but we're going to have to talk about it because I don't want it. What's your tagline again? we're
No one
going to
asked
have
me
to
to
talk
tell a story.
the,
What you got? What you got?
Lalaurie Mansion. That's where I'm going at because it is for
Yeah.
sale, everybody. It's for sale right now. And I want to know what your viewpoints or what you think about this mansion, if you had any personal experiences or know somebody that's had it, because I think what really pushed it in the forefront in many ways, especially me with up in Kentucky, is the American Horror Story series that filmed the Lalaurie in
Right.
their storyline. But can you tell us a little bit about the Lalaurie and if you've
So
experienced anything there?
I don't look in the windows of the lorry just because I just know that I'm going to see something. So even like I said, the other day I passed there, I took a couple of pictures and I deleted them from my phone. But what happened was they had Madame Lalaurie who lived there with her husband, and she was just an evil person and did experimentation on slaves in the attic. So it's like that third floor area. And for years, people heard screams and all this other kind of stuff. And even at one point saw her chasing this poor little child around, beating her, and then either threw the child or the child jumped off of the balcony and then, of course, died when she hit the ground. And they had a slave who was chained to the stove, and she cooked all the meals. And one night she decided, well, it would be better for all of us to die than to live like this anymore. So she set the house on fire. And the police had been called out before, but she always was like, come in for coffee. And, they didn't think anything was going on. And so the house got on fire. And when the firemen got to the attic, they found out she had been doing all of this experimentation on these slaves, like cutting off body parts and sewing it onto another. I mean, just horrible mutilation. One of the slaves had even jumped out of the window. She was just horrible murderer. And so they rescued them. And then they went over for some reason, what I've read, they brought them to the Cabildo to recover. Quite possibly it was being used as like a hospital or something at the time. And then she fled to Paris, supposedly, and that's where she lived for the rest of her life. And then now they have a grave for her, in St. Louis Cemetery, that supposedly she's supposed to be buried in. And I'm saying supposedly because I just don't believe she is. Now somebody said to me, well, I think they moved her body. I'm like, why was her body put there in the first place? She doesn't need to be in a Catholic cemetery. So, yeah. So it's a terrible story, but it's kind of one of those stories that I think is there to teach us a lesson. Like I said before, people are like, why is it still being haunted? Why hasn't anybody gone in there and done like, I always say, be gone, go into the light, go into the spirit, and I say, because maybe it's there as a lesson that, we never repeat history again. Maybe that's what it's there for. It's living history. It's energy history. So that's the Lalaurie house. But that's kind of also a compare to, how I said to y'all about Katrina, that people like, here it is almost 20 years later, and they're still saying it's dirty and you're going to get a disease. This is only like one small facet, but people do love that story.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But it's true. It is true because there have been many sightings of that place.
It's like our first serial killer, H.H. Holmes, and his castle in Chicago. Like I feel like the Lalaurie Mansion is kind of like that in the South. In a lot of ways. Like we have H.H. Holmes up here in the Northeast area, if you want to call Chicago East. Maybe it's more Midwest, but like I think, I hate to say it, I think of the Lalaurie Mansion when I think of New Orleans, but I'm glad I come across the Nickle tree, because I'm now thinking about a lot more other things other than the Lalaurie Mansion.
That's so good. That's so good to hear.
Yes.
Yeah, because that's the whole point. That's the whole point of sharing. Yes, it is. I would never say that it's not the haunted city, because it is. But not everybody experiences that. And some people are disappointed when they come. They're like, I didn't feel anything. I'm like, well, maybe this go round you weren't supposed to. Come back next year.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a great place to visit. And if I'm not somebody who's ever been to Europe, but I didn't realize really until, many years ago, my husband and I went to Las Vegas. And that's when I realized like they were like imploding these buildings. And it finally like dawned on me, oh, that's why they say we don't tear our buildings down, because it's like, oh, okay, a building gets old, just tear it down. Where it's like you got some heavy regulations on those buildings, and you if you have to add something or something burns down or hurricane comes or something like that, and that building was built in 1800, then you have to go find wood out of somewhere else, maybe that has been torn down or something that I'm sorry, not torn down, but blown down because you can't be rebuilt, and get that wood to put on your building. I mean, the Historic Society is very strict. And even when y'all were saying, like a Walgreens or something like that, it would have to go in the same building. And even when it's a new build on land that's right outside the French Quarter, Garden District, Warehouse District, I work in the Warehouse District. Even when it's built there, I mean, there are so many rules that you have to do. The structure has to look a certain way. Like Walmart does not look like regular Walmarts. It looks like a New Orleans.
It doesn't. Yeah, it's like a brickstone Walmart. It's different.
Right.
Yeah,
It does.
yeah, I've seen it. I was like, I saw it. I was like, wow, why does CVS look like that? It's like I've never seen CVS look like that before, right?
Yeah, because it has rules.
It has rules,
which is so funny of a ruleless city that has rules about that. That's what we have rules about.
Right. Yeah. That's wild. But I'm glad that you are actually exposing the positive side of the city, because of course everybody always looks towards the negative and the dark side of things, but there's a lot of good things that that are out there too. So I'm glad that you're exposing that as well.
I try to give both sides of the story.
Yeah, of course, as you should.
Yeah. So it's fun though. It is a fun city, and there's lots of things to do here. So
yes, there is. Yes.
Well, speaking of stories, Jill, I marketed this show today about your experience with a possibly haunted nun, and everybody wants to know about your experience with the nun. What happened in the school? If you don't mind to let us tell us the story of what happened before we let you go, because that would be awesome and amazing, and we thank you for it.
Okay. So again, I grew up Catholic. Most of the city was at the time Catholic. And so I went to this old school, and with, tons of kids and nuns and that kind of thing. There was this old nun, and she was so mean, and everybody hated to get to fourth grade because they were going to have Sister Borgia. And we would have lunchtime, and we'd be out, you go to lunch 20 minutes, and then they gave us like a crazy amount of time for recess compared to today. It was like a half an hour or something. But we would walk out after 20 minutes of lunch, and we'd see her coming back from the convent, and she'd walk through the schoolyard, and anybody who had her class, and I was one of them, right after lunch, you didn't get recess. Every day was a punishment. And so she'd go stand there. She wouldn't look at us. She'd stand there, and we'd all have to line up behind her. And she'd go to the back steps, and she'd stand there, and she'd make us stand in line with her arms folded, head straight ahead, for absolutely no reason. And then the bell would ring, and then we'd all go in the classroom. None of the other teachers said it was wrong. The principal didn't come and rescue us. There was nothing. We had every year this happened. And so I got my degree in teaching, although I haven't done that much of it, but I spent a very small amount of time teaching at this school. When I got older, like it was like I was a sub or something. I was a regular teacher, but they just needed somebody for 3 months. So they started talking about Sister Borgia haunting that hallway where she used to stand. And I normally never stayed late or anything. I just knew she was up there. And one day they, got left behind because they went to a faculty meeting or something. And I just went in the hallway. I kind of turned. I knew she was standing there. I knew it. And I ran downstairs, and I remember the secretary, because her son had been in my class. He was one of us that had to go stand like that. She just kind of looks at me, like shakes her head, like, I know you just saw her. And then years later, coincidentally, I moved my children because they had like this learning center thing, and my son needed that help. So I moved all my children there. And my daughter, the one who works with me now, came home one day and said, Mom, there's a haunted nun at that school. And there's a picture of her, like they made like a,
a shrine
mural.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Oh.
And so that's when I started realizing like the clairvoyancy, the real clairvoyancy of my children, of my girls, because she pretty much described the same thing. And she says, and because she said to me, and I know who it is. And I said, who is that? And she goes, it's that one they have hanging in the hallway. I had never told her that story. I had never said anything.
Real nun story. They should come out with a real nun story about that. That's wild.
So I don't think she's not coming hitting us or anything anymore, but it's
amazing though how. No, Joe, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's amazing how energy, even as negative as she was in real life, how it carried over into the afterlife, and it made such an imprint. And then them making a shrine of her, I'm sure didn't help. I mean, you know what I mean?
I never could figure it out. I just thought it was funny that my daughter, who knew who that was before, she had no idea the story, none. Because I wasn't telling my kids a story so they'd be like terrified to go to school.
Of course.
But it was like she told me, I know who it is. Wow. It's that lady they have hanging in the hall. So I'm like, oh my God, she saw her. So, I think, like I said, I don't think that there's one specific reason why people linger here. I don't think they classify it as that, not because they're evil and they're being punished, and not because they were mean to little children and have to be punished, or not because they missed their wife and they stayed around and now they're walking down hallways in the middle of the night. I think there's all kind of reasons. It's all of those reasons. We're all energy, they're energy, and sometimes we collide.
That's right.
Well, Jill, we really appreciate you and your storytelling on TikTok. Like, this is an awesome start off to Haunted October for us, for What the Frick Live. For people, before we let you go, but for people that's listening via podcast, where can they find you most, if you don't mind just telling everybody?
Well, right now, I am just on TikTok, the Nickle Tree. That's about all I've been able to conquer because I do work full-time, very over full-time. I do have a podcast called The Nickle Tree. And I started that. I know it's on Apple Podcasts and that kind of thing. There's only 2 episodes on there, so you're not going to find much. It's just difficult to maneuver everything right now. But I'm on almost every day on TikTok if you want to hear a different story.
Hey, and then I'm also thinking that your next business venture should be maybe a haunted tour guide, haunted.
Yeah. I get a lot of that. I get a lot of people saying, I'm coming in town. Or actually venues have reached out to me, different places and hotels, and they're like, hey, can you come take a walk through and tell us what you feel here? So it's just all kind of fun for me right now, for sure.
That's awesome.
Well, we appreciate you, Jill. Thank you so much. We're going to let you go. Thank you for starting off. You were excellent. Go, everybody, TikTok, the Nickle Tree over there. Listen to her story. She has fantastic stories with her family and other. And also, if you have a true haunted story down there in New Orleans or anything, you're also retelling stories.
Anywhere.
Yeah, anywhere.
We travel.
She's a great storyteller. So thank you, Jill. We'll let you go. Thank you. Have a wonderful night, and we'll be in touch.
All right.
Soon. Happy October. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Y'all have a great night.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
There we go. Jill from the Nickle Tree. I love her.
Yeah.
She's great.
Yeah, she's great. She is. Yeah.
She is a great storyteller. I do believe that's her calling. She's done a lot of weddings that have some paranormal stuff. So everybody go over there and check her out on TikTok. Next week for Haunted October, it's about time. One of my good friends. It's about time. One of my good friends, One Shin, is going to be on with us next week. One. All the way.
All the way.
Believe me, get your wine out next week. We're gonna have a little bit. I can't.
All right, I'll bring up the wine. I'm not a big winer, but I'll do it.
Get out the wine next week. I can't. I'm on medication tonight, so I can't do that. But get out the wine next week, and hopefully I'll be on camera. I'll be a lot better place too. But Haunted October, we're gonna be talking about desert phantoms. We're going out west to Arizona, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff. And Nane is going to share some experience that she's had. She's also had an alien abduction encounter, so that's going to be interesting if we pull that up too, and everything. But thank you everybody for tuning in this evening. We appreciate you. Please share this out. That helps our guest here on social media. If you're on Rumble, give us a positive Rumble. I am going to start marketing Rumble a lot more here in the next few months. But we love you all. Thank you. And please tune in next week, Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right here on Nation. We're going to be talking desert phantoms out of Arizona. Thank you all. Have a wonderful, awesome first October weekend. See you next week. Yay. Bye.